Poilievre may have slava Ukraini'd a little too hard, so there are people pushing back on the slava Ukraini. Also, Poilievre, I've got a whole banking series of tabs today talking about the open banking. Chrystia Freeland introduced this. The WEF introduced this in 2021. The Conservatives introduced this in 2021 under, I think it's O'Toole, maybe Scheer, but I think O'Toole. Regardless of all of that, Mr. Poilievre is pushing this as if it's a common sense conservative plan to, put money in your pocket and whatever. It's interesting because it's WEF through and through, and he's Mr. I'm not going to let the WEF run anything. So but in that same vein, he doesn't want to talk about the 2030 agenda. He doesn't want to talk about the Paris Climate Accord. He doesn't want to talk about any of those things, but he says, no, Canadians will decide. Yeah, BS, buddy, BS. And I've got the receipts to show and prove it. So that's very, very interesting. Dangerous roads. I've got one video of a truck passing I think it's in BC, but a lot of Brittany has some horrific crashes on her timeline. And I hadn't seen them. And I came across one because she was talking about another, and people got into conversations and sharing the footage of these crashes. I jaw-droppingly horrific. And to the degree where I had to warn people and say, like, be careful when you're driving, because a truck doing, 120 kilometers an hour may come out of nowhere and just drive over your car. It's unbelievable. So there's dangerous roads in Canada right now in a way that has never been true before. So if you're on the 401, be very aware. So yeah, wild stuff. And rail strike update. We've got to start with the rail strike update, because at first it was a lockout, and I didn't understand what the urgency was if they were without a contract since January, etc. Was it the union that said we're going to set this strike date at this time? And I said kind of offhand, there's lots to get to, let's get to it, because we're talking about the rail strike and we have to talk about all that. So that's where we're going to start. But I said kind of offhand, maybe that the union was trying to use the harvest as kind of a pressure point to pressure the government to get them to do what they want. And I think that it's actually the employer. The employer wants to push this contract through with the change of safety issues that the union doesn't want, and with the change of moving their people around the country at willy-nilly, wherever, whenever they want. I think that's what the employer wanted. They calculated that if they forced a lockout, that the government would stop it, and they'd force binding arbitration, and the arbitration would fall on their side, benefit their side rather than the laborers, right? Maybe that's an accurate calculation, maybe not. Maybe that's too big of a risk to take, you'd say. Maybe it is. I don't know. It seems to me like there's something weird going on. So it's plausible to me that the employer was making a gamble, like we can use this situation, because they knew last year that both of these contracts were going to be coming up at the same time. So plausible, right? It's interesting to me, though, that in the case of a shutdown, they would have to have essential services running. They would have to have all of these things in place that didn't seem like they were in place. And there's a whole lot of things that seem odd about this situation, because it seems like it was avoidable, but they were offered options by the union to avoid it, and the employer said no. And there were all sorts of different things that happened that raised concerns. Like I said, in order to be in legal strike position, I don't know about lockout position, but in order to be in legal strike position, they had to have essential service plans submitted to the people who oversee that stuff. And I don't know if that happened, but it doesn't seem like essential services are running. It doesn't seem like anything like that's running. So, or was running. So there's a lot of strange things that stand out about this. And I don't think we're being told the whole story. Here's another weird thing to add to our quiver of weird things. Food Professor says the report was released on October 6th, 2022. That's a few years ago. It presented to Ottawa provinces and municipalities a 2-year plan aimed at preventing any human-induced supply chain disruptions. We contributed to this report. However, no action was taken nationally. No action. Zero. This is action, collaboration, transportation, final report on the National Supply Chain Task Force 2022. So like, this is super important. We need this report. Okay, everybody, let's do this. Oh, let's spend resources and do this stuff. And then they would produce a report, they give it to the government wipes their butt with it, tosses it in the toilet, and that's that. Like, see you later. Thanks for all your work, guys. Like, I used to work for a company, and we used to have to be licensed by the ministry. And during pre-licensing time, you had to go through and like make sure all the paperwork was there and this and all that. And it seemed like ridiculous busy work for something that really, I mean, it probably mattered, but at the same time, it just seemed like a lot of busy work. And ultimately, do you think people are going to work as hard next time to come up with real solutions to problems if the government's not even going to bother to look at it or do any of these suggestions? And I mean, maybe the suggestions are ridiculous. Like, I haven't read this report, so I don't know. But it seems again like there's a lot of weird things about this shutdown, this unprecedented in Canadian history shutdown. And it seems like the government was well aware that this was coming. They could have done something to avoid it, and they didn't. And so that's, again, one of the another strange thing about all this. And it's not like they weren't explicitly warned. And, you know, here's ways to avoid all of this. We could, you know, finish labor disputes quickly and all that. CTV News is reporting tribunal orders rail workers back on the job, imposes arbitration. So yeah, this is a pretty impactful thing. The minister ordered the board to review this. The board reviewed it and came back with their decision yesterday. And here's that. Freight trains must start rolling again first thing Monday morning. So, okay, I don't know. I'm not a train guy. I don't know. But do trains not run on Sundays? Is that not, like, could they not start now? This was yesterday at 8:57 p.m. Couldn't they call and say, do you have guys coming on at midnight? Get guys coming on at midnight, because every day is a month delay or is a week delay, right? We're already at 4 days. By Monday, we'll be a month delayed during grain season. Timing matters, right? This all matters. And so couldn't we get people started faster? And it seems like this is another thing that just red flag sticks out to me. Monday? Like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get back to work on Monday. No worries, boss. Yawn, right? Like, okay, there's no urgency here. Monday? How about next Monday? Like, the Federal Labor Board ruled Saturday as it ordered thousands of rail employees back to work and to end a bitter contract dispute that shut down the country's two major railways. The decision from the Canadian Industrial Relations Board imposes binding arbitration on all involved parties following an unprecedented dual work stoppage at Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Kansas City that halted freight shipments and snarled commutes across the country. But the matter may not be settled for good, since the Teamsters Union representing workers with both companies is pledging to appeal the ruling in court. The board's decision dropped 2 days after Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon directed the arm's length tribunal to begin the arbitration process, saying the parties were at an impasse and Canadian businesses and trade relationships were at stake. The union representing the 9,300 affected workers challenged the government's move before the board, but the tribunal said it had no authority to decide whether the minister's directive was valid. The board had concluded that, in this case, it has no discretion or ability to refuse to implement in whole or in part the minister's direction or to modify their terms, wrote Chairwoman Jeanette Brazo in a pair of rulings. Brazo ordered the two companies and the engineers, conductors, dispatchers, and yard workers concerned to resume operations starting at 12:01 on Monday. On top of ending the lockout and simultaneous strike at CPKC, the ruling effectively voids the 72-hour strike notice to CN the union issued on Friday morning. The Teamsters said they will comply with the tribunal's decision, but plan to file a court appeal, arguing it sets a dangerous precedent. Quote, it signals to corporate Canada that large companies need only stop their operations for a few hours, inflict short-term economic pain, and the federal government will step in to break a union, said Paul B., president of the Teamsters Canada Rail Conference. The rights of Canadian workers have been significantly diminished today, he said in a release. So the workers are back to work. They're upset about it, but they'll comply, they said, with the work order. And I don't know if that applies to CPKC. Probably. It seemed like it in the article, but I don't know, right? But sometimes newspaper articles make up nonsense. Oh, I wanted to talk about something from yesterday as well, the abduction. I read the newspaper article that said, don't worry, she wasn't abducted. I think I actually have an update on here, but I can't. Sometimes the tabs that I have disappear. Anyway, regardless, fundamentally, the police made a release that said she was recovered. But the eyewitness said they got her in the car and they drove away with her. So that counts as an abduction. Even if they didn't get far, they succeeded in abducting her. So I don't know, but a family member told me yesterday of a news article from 2022 that she had firsthand knowledge of. She was a part of the situation that happened. Not exactly a part, but knew somebody who worked in blah, 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 blah. So she read the news article and she talked to the person and she said, do you know what the news article says? And the person said, yes. Don't believe a word in the news article. The news article is wrong. This is what happened. I work here. This is what happened. And the person was like, told the person who told me everything. And so the discrepancies were, I mean, jaw-dropping, like totally different stories, absolutely totally different stories. And one story was was kind of constructed to put you at ease. If you hear it, you're like, oh, well, you know, something terrible happened, but these things happen, right? Whereas the story with the details clearly sounds like there is some kind of fraud or some kind of something else going on, right? And so it's wild. So no matter what the news article says in this situation, right? Like, oh yes, everybody's back to work. We could take their word for it, but take it with a grain of salt, right? As you should everything, because the internet's a crazy, crazy place these days. All right, back to the article. The matter may not be settled for good. Teamsters are planning on appealing the ruling in court. The board decision dropped 2 days after Labour Minister McKinnon directed the arm's length tribunal to begin arbitration process, saying the parties were at an impasse and Canadian businesses and trade relationships were at stake. The union representing the 9,300 affected workers challenged the government's move before the board, but the tribunal said it had no authority to decide whether the minister's directive was valid. The board has conducted that in this case it has no discretion or ability to refuse to implement in whole or in part the minister's direction or to modify their terms, wrote Chairwoman Jeanette B. in a pair of rulings. Brazo ordered the two companies and the engineers, conductors, dispatchers, and yard workers concerned to resume operations starting at 12:01 a.m. on Monday. That's tonight at 12:01, midnight-ish. So it seems no urgency, right? No, everything's fine. Just leave everything where it is. We don't need to move anything. On top of ending the lockout and simultaneous strike at CPKC, the ruling effectively voids the 72-hour strike notice to CN Union issued on Friday morning. The Teamsters said they will comply with the tribunal's decision, but plan to file a court appeal, arguing it sets a dangerous precedent. It signals to corporate Canada that large companies need only stop their operations for a few hours. We already said that. The Canadian workers have been... yeah, blah, 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 blah. I've said that. So interesting stuff. Here's Jagmeet Singh being asked, listen, you said that you would end the confidence and supply deal if there's any action taken. And he says, basically part of the confidence and supply deal is that we will never vote for this. So the Liberals, if there's legislation, either it won't be a confidence vote or the Conservatives will vote with the Liberals to pass the vote in order to pass the working back to work legislation to ensure no stoppage. And so, but you could also calculate perhaps that the board's already ruled people are back to work. If they stop again, that would be problematic. But you could run an election now, so you could vote with Jagmeet Singh, and maybe the Bloc comes in. Does the Bloc have enough to counter NDP and Conservative no confidence vote? I don't know. We'll see. So that would be interesting. That would be interesting if this whole thing ended up in an election, right? Before Jagmeet's pension. Whew. I think that would be the pet name for the election, right? Like the election before Jagmeet got a pension. Anyway, regardless, here is Jagmeet Singh. Oh, I didn't play it yet. And he dodges by saying, basically, we never said we'd support any kind of return to work legislation, and so the Liberals know that, and it's basically part of the plan. So the short answer is no, this won't have any impact on the confidence and supply deal. Womp womp. Here you go.
Mr. Singh, you said you were asked in French, but in English, if the Liberal government enacts back to work legislation, would that be enough for you to pull out of the supply and confidence agreement?
Well, we said at the very beginning when we forced the Liberals to move forward on things like dental care, when I forced Justin Trudeau to move forward on pharmacare, we said if you ever think that you could bring in back to work legislation and call it a confidence vote, we will vote against that every single time. We made it very clear. So they know we will not support any interference, not just back to work legislation, but any interference. If it comes to Parliament, we will be voting against it. We will oppose it. We will make it very clear. We're the only ones, the only party that will always stand in solidarity with working people.
No. That's not standing in solidarity with working people. Unbelievable stuff. Here is the food professor again. He says CPKC railway shutdown update for farmers. CPKC manages around 32,000 kilometers of railway tracks spanning Canada, Mexico, and the United States. As of now, CPKC has been idle for 2 days. If the shutdown continues through the weekend, by Monday, it will mark 4 days of inactivity. Recovery is estimated at 1 week for each day for the system being down. During this season, CPKC typically handles about 685,000 metric tons of grain per week in Canada. Consequently, a 4-day shutdown results in a backlog of approximately 2,740,000 metric tons. To put this into perspective, it would take 49,818 long-haul trucks to transport this volume of grain. Delays can compromise the prices farmers receive for their grains and the quality of the product. Farmers are already in trouble. This is, is it an attack on farmers, right? And you can see the CPKC grain report here if you're interested in more fine details, hard details, and things like that. But is this an attack on our food system, right? Blowing up food plants wasn't enough. I went in and I got a box of chocolate cereal just to have as a prop. Quick Dick McDick says, expected my MP Kathy W. to be very vocal about this rail debacle quite some time ago. Same for Andrew Scheer, Randy Hoback, John Barlow, or even Pierre Poilievre. Why is it crickets on this issue? Most constituents who elected you to represent them are harvesting grain to ship right now. So why so quiet, guys? Weird, right? Like, seems like strange. And Corny Jakowski says, Dan McTeague says, Liberals and Conservatives teaming up makes that unlikely. Corey says, what if it becomes a confidence vote and the government falls? What would happen with the strike? So, like, I just explained what I think would happen with the strike, but I think it's a good question. Dan, I think Dan kind of gives not a great answer. He says Liberals and Conservatives teaming up make that unlikely. Why would the Conservatives vote with the Liberals on a confidence issue if the strike is no longer happening and you don't need the legislation to get them back? I would take the opportunity and take down Trudeau and say, it's election time, buddy. I wish I could think of a good grain pun to like drive that home, but I really can't. Oh well. But I think it's a great question. And Jakowski says, does the Liberals and Conservatives make it unlikely? The Conservative Party has been very quiet about this. Does extending this strike worth a change for an early fall election? Maybe. I think that if the only way to get people working again was to cooperate with the Liberals and pass a legislative bit that forced them back to work, then the Conservatives would do it. I think that would be a calculation that would be a no-brainer, because if they don't do it that way, then they'll be, if they didn't do that and they were on the hook for causing, say the election's 21 days, okay, and say each one of those days is $1 billion, like say the strike lasts that long, the shelves empty, the economic impact is $1 billion a day times 21 times however many months that is to get back on track. Like that is an absolute complete disaster. And the Liberals will blame Poilievre for that, saying, if only he had voted for us instead of going for this cheap election, blah, 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 blah. You see what I'm saying? So they'd saddled Poilievre with that. And not that I can say I can't blame them, but it's an opportunity that would be politically, that's how they roll. That's what they would do. And so, but at this point in time, it looks like that's handled. It looks like the strike is averted, and it's going to be tied up in the courts for the next little while anyway. So 21-day election, yes, please. But again, I'll show you in just a minute. Like this bank thing, this bank thing right here outlines just how much of a WEF agent the Conservative Party of Canada and maybe Poilievre himself is, right? We'll get there in just a minute. We've got to go through the government stuff, but the grab bag of governance, as I like to say. But the rail strike stuff, I don't know. I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion that the Conservatives are going to vote with the Liberals if they know the NDP aren't going to vote with the Liberals, and if the math works out that the NDP and the Conservatives have more than the Bloc plus the Liberals, then maybe we see fireworks, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see. Mr. Surveillance says, I've been asking this question. Let's move on. Grab bag of governance. Slava Ukraini. Poilievre is getting ratioed in the comments because of his support for Ukraine, and it's exactly the same as Justin Trudeau. And I'll show you Justin Trudeau and Poilievre back to back on this whole thing, but it's pretty ridiculous. Mr. Surveillance has a great question. He says, I've been asking this question for a long time, and not a single liberal supporter has dared forwarded an explanation. Outside of deep corruption within the Liberal government, how is it possible that tiny Canada, in a debt crisis, is in the top 5 funding nations for Ukraine? Good question. Good question. We're number 3, right? We're number 5. 1, 2. Number 6, if you include EU institutions together, but number 5 if it's just looking at countries, right? So that's pretty incredible. Wild. Why do you think that is? Here is Justin Trudeau to explain. This is yesterday. This is a tweet from yesterday, August 24th, 2024. And he says, Ukrainians declared their future as a free nation 33 years ago today, but that independence and the democracy and the freedom it brought was never accepted by some. When Putin invaded Ukraine, when he unleashed bombs, tanks, and troops on a sovereign nation, every nation had a choice to stand for freedom or to watch it fall. I'll just point out here that Canada Day didn't happen in Guelph this year because we didn't have enough volunteers for fireworks, which is a bullshit excuse, by the way. And it didn't happen in Ottawa, as far as I understand it. The Canada Day celebrations that we used to have to celebrate the birth of our country and freedom and being Canadian all together and unity and all that stuff, we don't have that anymore. Our Prime Minister celebrates the Ukrainian Independence Day. You see what the difference is? If they had an opportunity to cancel a day where Canada got together to celebrate its birthday, they already canceled it. Done. They've done away with it. You see what I'm saying? Back to this. Canada never saw it as a choice to support Ukraine. It's who we are to support Ukraine. We've stood with a free, independent Ukraine always, first to recognize their nation and then to defend it. What? So we trained Ukrainian fighter pilots. We brought together allies and froze $50 billion in Russian assets and put that money to work for Ukraine. We sent we went and robbed a bank in Russia and then gave that money to Ukraine. Yay! We sent, I don't like that at all. I'm making a very disgusted looking face. We sent Canadian-made light armored vehicles to the front lines, and Ukraine made dancing videos on them. It's like they were nurses during the COVID era. Because this is our fight, says Trudeau. Ukraine isn't just fighting for their independence. They're fighting for everything Putin wants to destroy. Freedom, democracy, prosperity. Is the democracy they're touting like the democracy where you vote for somebody and that vote doesn't count because it's alt-right? Is that the democracy they want? The prosperity where you get to go to work and then you get to give migrants more than you make to hang out in hotels all the time? No? Is that what you're talking about? Right? Freedom, where if you say something wrong, you get thrown in the gulag by Keir Starmer. Yeah, no, that's what we're defending. Bullshit. The proud Ukrainians who've settled in Canada, the largest diaspora outside Europe, reminds us that Ukraine is not a faraway foreign land. Yes, it is. It's right over by Russia. That's pretty far away. It's our ally. No, it's not. Our friend. Maybe it's our ally. It's our ally because Justin Trudeau signed a piece of paper saying that we're allies, but they're not a part of NATO and we're a part of NATO. And we don't even meet our NATO commitments. It's like you're dating a girl, but you've met another girl and you'd really like to date her too. But you don't actually do all the things you should do with the first girl, but you ask the other girl out anyway. They're not doing a good job. Don't do that, by the way. It's very, very shady and nobody really likes it. It turns out very badly. I've never done that really, but I would imagine it turns out badly. And we'll celebrate that independence next year and the year after that and the year after that, because this is a war that Ukraine will win. Slava Ukraini. No, all of this is wrong, but this answers the question of why is Canada in the top 5 funding for Ukraine, because Justin Trudeau is an ideological lunatic who thinks that Ukraine can win a war that it absolutely cannot win. Here is Lacey, and she says, Justin, no one cares about Ukraine. Canada is a mess because of your bullshit. And then the other response to this was, just so I'm clear, fighting for democracy and freedom in another country is good, but fighting for democracy and freedom in our country involves invoking the Emergencies Act and freezing bank accounts. Make it make sense. It does not make sense. These people are lunatics. They're absolutely bonkers. And they hope that you don't realize their inconsistency. They hope that you don't realize how crazy they actually are, right? they have no consistent morals or values or anything. They will adopt your ideal if they think that'll win a vote or more power for them, and then they'll drop it the second they think that another better opportunity has come along. Mr. Surveillance again is highlighting Pierre Poilievre. He says, woo, Poilievre is getting ratioed to death with this. Almost 2,000 replies, and all of them against continued funding of the corrupt oligarchy that is Ukraine. So Poilievre says, Justin Trudeau, let me slava Ukraine just as hard as you. He says, 33 years ago, Ukraine declared its independence from the evil Soviet Union as the Ukrainian people once again fight heroically for their freedom and independence. Common sense conservatives are proud to stand with them for freedom. I want to wish all Ukrainians a happy and victorious Independence Day. Cringe. And so there are people other than me who are upset with this. She said, Truth Seeker says, this is why I hate both the liberals and conservatives. You're both paid for by the same masters. You don't even know the actual reason or the proxy war that started in 2014. You're going to money launder Canadian tax dollars just like Trudeau. Petrified COVID parent says, disappointed with this take. Conservatives are sick of this war and frustrated with our tax dollars being sent over just to eliminate a generation of young Ukrainian men. Call for peace. What's Up Canada says, if you really care about Ukrainian people, you would stop the government from the decade of funding Banderite Nazis controlling the country, and more and more and more, right? And just, your usual suspects and everybody else. Nobody is on board with this bullshit. Nobody. And nobody says, yay, let's send more money to Ukraine because we know we're going to win. What does winning mean exactly? Are we going to change regimes in Russia? Are we just going to take out Vladimir Putin because he's not going to accept what NATO did despite them promising not to do, right? Like the creeping borders closer to Russia in violation of the Minsk Accords. Regardless, there's all sorts of stuff that happened in the 90s, in 2014, Victoria Nuland, the neocons and their expansionary wars, et cetera, et cetera. It's absolutely crazy. So like, I don't want more globalists taking over Canada and sending our money to Ukraine, pretending that winning the war is virtuous somehow. I don't think it is. I think that NATO should probably apologize, stop what it's doing, and stop what it's doing. I think that's what they should probably do. Canada should stop importing people who can't drive. Yikes. Here is a video showing a truck driver missing 2 head-on collisions after attempting to pass another transport truck. Oh, this is in Alberta. I thought this was in BC, but again, Brittany has some absolutely, I'll have to find them because they're absolutely crazy. And here's this one. This is also pretty crazy. The truck driver passes this guy. There's 2 turns that he passes this guy through, and you won't believe how he misses a head-on collision. Here we go. Is there no audio? Oh, I guess there's no audio. So he's behind the truck right now, and he pulls around the truck, but there's a bend. You can see. I don't know why it's a little pixelated, so apologies for the quality. The quality is not as good as it could be. He's going around the truck, and you can see up ahead there's a little bit of a bend. Right? There's a bend. And here's a truck coming in the other lane, and so he goes into the left shoulder to miss the truck. And then there's another truck coming. Again, sorry for the pixelization. And he stays in the left shoulder, and then he returns to the right lane after, many bends of the road. This is a disaster, absolute disaster. And people don't even understand how people don't understand the danger that they're in. You don't know what the heck's happening here. Here it is. And she says he was only sentenced to 6 years, all falsified paperwork too. No lane is safe. She says no speed is safe. Even when you're at a dead stop, watch your surroundings. Yeah, I watched this, and again, I was shocked. Here we go. Again, no volume. Oh, I'm in the way. So he's texting, and the car is stopped. He's going 100 kilometers an hour. He just drives right over it. Gone. I think 3 people were killed. A grandmother and 2 children. Awful. Absolutely awful. And not that I avoid stories like that. I just didn't see that, although a friend of mine was telling me about a story that involved children. And like, if I see a headline that talks about it, I can't read the details because it's too much, because the world is full of tragedy. And, man, I've experienced and seen enough tragedy that I understand it's out there. And Yeah. Larry Book. Moving on a little bit, let's talk about, this is Poilievre selling the open banking. Okay. Open banking is a WEF initiative. Why is Pierre Poilievre championing a WEF position on open banking? Open banking leads to digital IDs. So Pierre Poilievre is pushing WEF-backed digital IDs. Here we go. The OG Rebel says the CPC and Poilievre constantly state that they're the common sense party. Where's the common sense in this? This is digitalized slavery. Would be a shame if on the fence supporters of the establishment saw this for what it was, or saw this, period. Wiretap Media says, under the guise of convenience and safety, the Conservatives' woke banking agenda, open banking, will become Canada's social credit system. So here's Poilievre introducing this with his shadow minister, and I don't know if it's too fast. It is not. Here we go.
Our bank, when big corporations have more control and less competition, you lose. That's because they don't have to compete to make you better off. That's the case in our banking sector, where the big six control 93% of the business. One of the reasons for that is it's very hard, very cumbersome to move between banks. If you are not happy with your service, your savings, or your mortgage rate, getting up and leaving to go to another bank or even an upstart is very cumbersome. That's why we have a new common sense conservative bill from my shadow minister of competition, Ryan Williams, called the Consumer-Led Banking Act. What's in the bill?
Well, this is all about financial freedom. Freedom for Canadians to be able to take their data from one bank freely and share that with another bank or institution. And this bill will ensure that the government changes the rules so the banks have to share that information, your information. So we create competition.
With your permission.
With your permission. And you create competition, meaning that you have more banks, more applicants, more services that can compete for your dollar. And it always means, when this has been implicated across the world, more savings and better service. And that's what we're looking at for
Which
Canadians.
countries have done this?
We have Brazil, UK, Australia. So we are...
Hold on. So he said Brazil, UK, Australia. This is a Wayback Machine. When I tried to go to this on the WEF website, it was gone. So just gone, just poof, gone, magic gone. You know, the censorship is unbelievable, but not surprising. Right? I'm just disappointed, right? But when I went to the Wayback Machine, I found this lovely article here, right, talking about what's next for open banking, April 6, 2021. Pierre Poilievre wasn't the leader of the Conservatives back then, right? What's next for open banking? And it's got the list of banks, countries that are already doing this. Chart 2, the UK leads Europe for now. Number of TPPs in EEA countries, September 2020. And is Canada on that list? I don't see Canada on that list. But UK, Germany, Sweden, France, Netherlands. And UK has got 189 of these banks. Germany's following is second place with 36. And so, I mean, that's interesting to me. They mentioned Brazil, but Brazil's not on this list either. Maybe it's European countries. But I find it interesting that they're saying we're already behind on this because all these other countries are doing this. It's a WEF agenda item tabled in 2021. What? Right? Kindly Angry is responding to this. March 22nd, 2024, the World Economic Forum says, can the open transaction network transform the global economy? And Kindly Angry says, Open Transaction Network is WEF groundwork for digitization and control of your spending and will be connected to social credit. Open banking is coming to Canada soon. Another WEF strategy is being implemented in Canada by WEF agents. So Poilievre is saying you can opt in if you want to, and it's the common sense conservatives. You can, easily, one of the things that they're trying to do is convince you can easily move your banking stuff from one bank to another. That's cumbersome and hard now. It's not cumbersome and hard. You go to the bank and you say, give me all my money. And they get really flustered and they say, we can't do that. You need to tell us why you want all your money. And then you say, I want to change banks and give it to me in a cashier's check or however it is. And if you ask for cash, then they get really upset. But they get frustrated. They don't want to give you your money. They want to put you off. They want to set an appointment with you. And you say, no, give me the bank manager. Get the manager out here now. And I want my money and I want it now. And if it's $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, they get upset, right? And they try and convince you to stay. But you can like take your money. And then how you move banks is once you get that money out of the bank, then you walk across the street to another bank. Or you just put it into Bitcoin. Or you walk across the street to another bank and you put it in there. That's it. Bingo, bango, bongo. So super cumbersome, right? But they're trying to find a way to sell it to you. Like, aren't you frustrated with your current bank and don't you want to just make one phone call and have all that data moved over with your permission, right? It's all about your data. And once you agree, now you're in the trap, right? Canadian Broken by Trudeau says the WEF says we need open banking, which is probably why Chrystia Freeland and Doug Ford and Jagmeet Singh are pushing it. What open banking needs to become the future of banking. So this is the link. When I clicked on this link, it took me to this broken page. And then I took this link and I put it into the Wayback Machine and it got me onto this page. And this is what's next for open banking from 2021 on the WEF website, the WeForm. And it says, this creates big opportunities to make banking better, in particular, tailored, personalized solutions for every area of money management. This includes, as society recovers from the coronavirus pandemic, fraud prevention for the vulnerable, as well as help for those with an unpredictable income in managing their finances and getting a mortgage. Yeah, because people with unpredictable incomes need to get into open banking. That's definitely what they need to do. You know why? Because the open banking people will bribe them. Come into open banking and we'll give you $1,000 a week. Free, just we want your data. One of the critical drivers of this change is open banking, where consumers allow third-party providers to use financial information held by their bank to inform new products and services using technology known as application program interfaces, APIs. And then, so you don't want an API being able to plug into your bank. And we already have APIs plugging into Manulife, as far as I understand it. And Manulife's a big bank. And so what? Digital technology is critical to future success. Our report with the EIU found that 87% of countries have some form of open APIs in place. The building blocks are there, but open banking can only be successful and sustainable if it has consumer confidence. Consumers must see a clear benefit from sharing their data. This means differentiated, tailored products. It also means stable, reliable systems that are capable of handling steep increases in demand and delivering rapid service as open banking takes off. The complex legacy IT system that many banks are still using cannot deliver this confidence. They have high operational risk, do they? Meaning new services cannot be delivered seamlessly. They don't have the capabilities to create and launch products quickly, and they can't innovate and create tailored, hyper-personalized experiences. Did you hear that, RBC? Did you hear that, CIBC? Did you hear that, Canadian banks? You guys are not secure. You have high operational risks. You can't deliver new services seamlessly. You don't have capabilities to launch products and all sorts of crazy stuff. Are you going to take that from these WEF shysters? For open banking to succeed, banks must embrace an end-to-end digital architecture. There's the rub. We have to know everything all the time. This requires modern banking platforms that are based on open APIs, which they just said are already there. Driven by AI analytics, this allows data to be easily processable by third-party providers. Oh, we'll just send this to the AI, don't worry. Have you seen Eagle Eye? It also means banks can use the data internally and gain high-quality insights for better service personalization. This was a top priority for nearly a third, 32% of respondents in the EIU survey. Elastically scalable, advanced technologies like the cloud are able to cope with rapidly rising and highly variable use. That's a basic, if you're building a website and you say, well, how much traffic are you anticipating? How much does one customer mean to you? Do you have a lot of customers that are $100 each, or do you have 4 customers that are $1 million each, right? That scale matters, right? If you're Apple and you have a lot of customers that are $1,000 each, you need to have a lot of scale and elasticity to manage all those users for support, for purchase, for all of that stuff, for sales, everything, right? But if you are somebody who's in the financial world or something to that effect, maybe a lawyer or something like that, then each lead, each lead represents a different kind of connection. And so if each lead is a callback, follow-up, and so on and so forth, maybe you have far fewer, right? A lawyer would have a capacity of X number of callbacks per week. So you only need whatever. So the elasticity just means being able to scale, but that's basic. That's basic when you're building a website. Highly secure. Again, basic when you're building a website. If the banks aren't highly secure now, what are they? Like, honestly, now and then in 2021 and in 2010 when my work was depositing my bank account or my money into my bank account, right? And before that too, right? It was all done by computers. Ian says, open banking, as described, is simply centralization of identity and banking data under a single regulator with an illusion of separate accounts and banks. It's a precursor to a CBDC and Freeland's dream of control. And here's the Global News article from 2023 talking about this. Open banking could mean cheaper services and a better credit score. What is it? So Pierre Poilievre is championing this Chrystia Freeland WEF 2021 CBDC digital ID central banking nonsense. Do you trust him? Why do you trust him? Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful